You're listening to the Vocabbett podcast, where I help students improve their vocabulary for the SAT, ACT, and life itself using my unique and research-backed story-based method. On this podcast, I'm sharing the best tips and tricks for a more enriched vocabulary and pain-free test day. Hello, and welcome to episode number 9 of the Vocabbett podcast. I'm Erica Abbett, a former English and history teacher, the author of the young adult novel Ahead of Her Time, and the founder of the vocabulary company Vocabbett. So I have a really fun podcast for you guys today. It's called Are These Hit Songs Ruining Your Grammar? And I know that I primarily focus on vocabulary here. It is called Vocabbett, but I do also help with broader English skills, and grammar is definitely among them. So if you've been listening to this podcast since the beginning, you know that I have the most profound respect for the power of repetition. The research shows that if you hear a new word 8 times, you're pretty likely to remember it. And so my method is all about engineering those 8 impressions in the most painless way possible through stories. But here's the deal. Just like we can almost subconsciously learn new words and concepts through repetition, if you repeatedly hear something that is incorrect, you're also pretty likely to subconsciously pick that up as well. And if there's one thing that we hear over and over, it's songs, even more than stories. So for today's podcast, I'm sharing 3 hit songs with sneaky grammatical errors in them that might be sabotaging your grammar. And let's be real, I know that basically every song in the world is riddled with grammatical errors. So you might be like, how did you pick out just 3? But what I've done is picked out songs and instances of grammatical issues that I actually hear people using. For the most part, a lot of these songs, like we know you're saying this to make it rhyme, but I've picked out instances that are pretty subtle and that I actually hear people internalize and use. With all that being said, let's dive in. All right, the first song that might be subtly sabotaging your grammar is Shape of You by Ed Sheeran. I'm in love with the shape of you. I love Ed Sheeran. This is not in any way a dig against Ed Sheeran or any of these artists, but there is a line in the song Shape of You that is grammatically incorrect, and it is a grammatical error that I hear people use constantly. You and me are thrifty, so go all you can eat. Fill up your bag and I fill up your plate. I'm curious. I wish that we were physically together right now because I would ask how many people in the audience even caught the grammatical error in that. I bet that it was about 50%. So he said, you and me are thrifty. And technically, it should be you and I are thrifty. People seem to get really confused about when to use me or I and who should go first when you're talking about multiple people. And the rule of thumb is this. The other person goes first. And I like to think of it as, you're polite. You hold the door for people. You let other people go first in real life and in grammar. So he did do it correctly in the sense that he said you first because the other person goes first. But then he said you and me are thrifty. And it should be you and I are thrifty. And how you know if it's me or I is you take the other person out of the sentence and then see what it would be grammatically. So would it be me is thrifty or I am thrifty if you take the you out of there? It would be I am thrifty. So it's you and I are thrifty. And you may notice that that verb changes to be singular or plural. So it can be am, is, are, whatever. But the main point is it me is thrifty or I am thrifty? And is and am are just different forms of the same verb, the verb to be. So it should be you and I are thrifty. The second song that might be sneakily sabotaging your grammar is Better Now by Post Malone. You probably think that you are better now. When I first heard this song, I was driving to tutoring and it's totally catchy. I'm not at all insulting the song, but when I heard the line that I'm about to share with you, I literally groaned. I had both hands on the steering wheel and I was just like, oh gosh, this is the next problem. Once the people who have kind of grown up on this song grow up, I predict that there's going to be a new wave of people making this grammatical mistake. mark my words, I bet that we will see a bunch of kids in 5 years or whatever say would have gave instead of would have given. So gave is a word. It's absolutely a correct word to use a lot of the time. It's just the past tense, right? I gave you anything, I gave you everything. But when it becomes that would have, it needs to be would have given. So Post Malone in this song should have said, I would have given you anything, everything. I can't remember which one comes first, but I would have given, not I would have gave. The third song that might be sneakily sabotaging your vocabulary is Boyfriend by Justin Bieber. This song is quite the throwback. It came out in 2012. This was one of the first big Justin Bieber songs. It's certainly the first time that I ever heard of him. And it goes like, if I was your boyfriend, I'd never let you go. I bet that a lot of people, if you said, okay, just correct all the grammatical mistakes in this song, I bet that 9 out of 10 people would not catch that one. And that's because it is the subjunctive. It's a little bit different in every language, but at least in English, basically a lot of people confuse the subjunctive and the past tense. So if I was mixes up those two tenses. You can say I was, but it would be if I were. And a lot of people want to say I was because in the past tense, you wouldn't say I were doing this. So people want to tack that if on and they want to say if I was. But technically, it's I was and if I were, because that conditionality of it, that if of it there, changes it to where it's no longer a past tense sentence, right? If I were, that's not something that happened in the past. This is a conditional. This is a subjunctive. And so technically it's if I were. So in this song, it should be if I were your boyfriend. If I were to guess, I would say that English is going to drop the subjunctive within easily 100 years. It'll just kind of fall out of use. But until that time, absolutely you should know that for the SAT and just for being a more educated person. It is still part of our language. And so it's if I were, not if I was. All right, that's all for today. I hope you liked this podcast. Just a reminder that the Vocabbett membership is officially open for enrollment. With it, you get access to a huge vault of existing vocabulary boosting content. I have a ton of videos that I recorded on mindset tips and etymology, and there are pre and post tests and all that fun stuff. In addition to that, you get an email with every podcast that goes out with the text accompaniment to it. So you get kind of a little PDF booklet that shares if I have a story that day, it'll give you the text of the story and all of the definitions that you might need. On a day like today, I'll post a preview of it so you can see what it would look like, but it's, full of pictures and text, and it's another way to get the correct impressions just in a lot less time. So if you scroll through this email or this booklet, it's giving you an additional impression of everything that I'm saying, but it doesn't take an extra 20 minutes to go through it, right? You can kind of scroll through it in 2 seconds, and it doubles the number of senses that you're using, auditory and visual, and really accelerates your learning potential. With all that being said, I will see you on Tuesday.